Going live. Preparing to stream live webinar. Setting up webinar. Good. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another rip-roaring edition of the OpenJS Foundation Standards Working Group meeting. Hi. Let's start with any announcements. Usually it's me that lists out announcements. Does anybody else want to list any announcements?
I got nothing.
Got nothing? Okay. I think everybody who is here was also in the call earlier about just OpenJS World updates, that registration is now open, that the call for proposals has been extended through Friday, February the 28th. Other important things, in case you may missed it, is of course that the Collab Summit is happening the 2 days following OpenJS World, and we actually have a venue now, which we're very excited about, so folks can book their travel for the conference and the Collab Summit, and I would really encourage you to do that as early as possible, because the hotel block will definitely fill up. So that's that. Other announcement-y things, I'm not thinking of any right now. So there we go. I think we want to start with the most pressing issue for us, which was one we also talked about in the CPC meeting today, which is chartering. And I wonder, I know that we're somewhat, but not quite blocked on admin policy docs getting landed. I think this is an area where, however, we do need to provide more info to the CPC in preparation for this. So it'd be great if we could kind of bang this out and be able to run with it. Miles or Joe, any other thoughts from this conversation, or Emily from the CPC meeting today?
Yeah, two quick things. One, it looks like Robin needs to be promoted. Hi, Robin. Separately, honestly, it seems to me like the big thing that we need to do is create a document in the CPC repo about working groups, similar to the one that is in the Node.js PSC repo. I'm just gonna dig that up and drop it for reference. So yeah. Here you go. It kind of documents what working groups are, how you start a work group, how you bootstrap governance, and then what the current working groups are and what their scopes are. So most likely we would want to we potentially could even copy paste a chunk of this and just kind of replace all the references to TSC with CPC, modify the copy as it made sense, and then include a section specifically about the standards working group and the scope. After reviewing a couple of the projects over in the Node.js repo and how it was set up, I kind of feel, and people please feel free to let me know if you feel differently, but the only real thing that isn't documented right now that I think would be good to land is the PR that we're actively working on who can go to meetings and how we make that decision. I think landing that along with kind of this upstream pull request to the CPC repo should likely be sufficient to officially charter us, in my own opinion. Then oh, it looks like, yeah, so Joe, you were saying you have this working groups thing that's in there.
Yeah, I mean, I basically copied over the Node stuff. I updated some of the language in some of the admin policy docs, but not all of it. And it's been near the top of my list to get done, but hasn't yet.
Yeah, it looks
So-
like you just copy pasted it, but so I mean, my thought process here, and you know, like I see what you did here. It's a lot of like, I think it's good to move this PR forward, but I don't know that like, I think we could open a second PR that's more scoped. I just haven't had time to work on this, but I do think the work is fairly straightforward if someone has time to volunteer to.
Well, I've got this started, and I think 2 of the 3 docs I've converted to OpenJS. So let me just kick out the other 2. I'll get them done definitely before the next meeting, before the next CPC meeting.
Okay, I guess the one thing that I would say, just from like a timing perspective, but if you're planning to get that done by the next CPC meeting, it's probably fine, is like, we would need to get that working groups doc like landed before we could open a pull request that would amend and add the standards group to it. So that would, if it remains part of that PR, it would arguably block this work. But if no one else is volunteering to do it right now, that is probably a non-issue.
Would you rather I pull out the working group file itself and then continue with the other 2, but create a new pull request with the working group one updated that can be modified with standards, description?
I think realistically, it's fine to be in there in that draft up and until the point that someone opens another PR, as long as you have no objections to anyone else opening an alternative PR for just that one document. I don't think there's
Nope.
an issue.
Yeah, not at all. And anyone wants to get involved in this one, feel free to as well.
Oh, I have an opportunity to use one of my favorite expressions. There's no point in licking the cookie right now. So it's like whoever wants to do the work should just do it.
I like that.
Wow. I like that.
Trying to get that pull request open right now to keep it moving locally, you know.
Okay, so let me ask maybe a dumb question. I don't know. I'm sorry if it is. Because I honestly haven't looked very closely at the admin docs. Joe, are there any other things we can be doing to move this along, or is it really just like these 2 PRs that we're talking about, the number 56 and the admin PRs?
I'm not sure of what else we would need.
Okay.
Sorry, Mike Samuel has his hand up.
Oh, yep. Mike.
Yeah, just wondering if you need help with copy editing or other minutia, what should I be looking at?
In terms of the draft PR that I have open?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll paste it in again into the chat. It's pull request 443 in the cross project council. These are 3 documents that I brought over from the Node Foundation, previously known as the Node Foundation. The working groups and the org management, I have not updated yet, but the 3rd one, scrolling to it, I think I've converted that to be OpenJS, the transfer repo into org policy. So if you wanted to look at the working groups doc and kind of just, you could gut all of the stuff that is in the, I'm scrolling to it here, the current working groups. We could delete all of that and then add in standards when we're ready. And then I just need to someone needs to update all the other language to be more reflective of OpenJS than Node.js.
Right. So I should take cross project council pull 443 and bring that in as a pull for standards removing that section that you mentioned and updating the language to the standards team specific.
Yeah, and you can either update this PR and I can work on the other doc and we can get this one over the finish line, or you can pull it out into a new PR and add standards and we could treat that separately, whatever is easiest for you.
All right, I'll take that on.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So do we think we can get progress on this by the next CPC meeting? Is that the goal then?
Yes,
Okay.
I would like to, yes. And I'll coordinate with Mike to get that done.
Groovy. All right. Let's move on to number 56, which is that PR that Miles mentioned on getting permission to attend meetings. I'm going to open up the link. Basic policy. Miles, is there, do you want to summarize any changes or updates since the last, let's see, January 14th, since the last meeting?
Someone drop a link into the chat for that, just to quickly.
Got it.
Thank you for the boop. Yeah, so looking at it again, so I mean, if we have 5 minutes, we could probably go through this and just reach consensus and land it. I had some suggestions from Emily that I'm just committing and landing because I trust you.
Okay.
And then look at the text again and see. I'll just read it really quickly. Attending external standards meetings at various times, members of the standards team or foundation projects will attend standards meetings at external organizations as a representative of the OpenJS Foundation. If a member would like to attend a meeting as a delegate of the OpenJS Foundation, they should open an issue stating the standards meeting or series of meetings they wish to attend, the OpenJS Foundation's relationship to this standards organization, the date and time, the date and location of the meeting or meetings, if they will be attending in person or remotely, the estimated cost of their participation. The issue should be labeled with standards agenda and will be approved in the next team meeting via the consensus seeking process. So the one outstanding thing right here from Emily is that doesn't believe that the estimated cost should be part of their participation. Does anyone have any strong feelings on this?
I think it's part of the, well, I'm about to talk myself into a circle. Hold on just a second, let me think.
If I can use a very strong example that I think is reasonable here. You know, there are meetings all over the world. And while we are not like directly responsible for the budget, I do think personally with the way that the travel fund is currently going, if something is very expensive, it is likely that if that request goes to the CPC will probably defer to the group that is sending the person to say, hey, there's this $10,000 expense. Is that important? An example of this would be, you know, this gets covered by Google, but I go to Geneva sometimes for ECMA executive committee work. Geneva is expensive. It costs close to $2,000 or $3,000 for even like an economy flight on certain airlines, and hotels are quite expensive. So there's no real way to do it cheap. Something like the TPAC last year was in Japan and would also be thousands of dollars. And so I do think that the estimated cost of attendance is something that can help us prioritize if we want to send people or approve it, or alternatively, maybe request that they attend remotely rather than in person. And that does to me seem like something that we should kind of deal with prior to sending someone to the CPC to ask for funding. That's at least my feeling on it, but very happy to defer to others if they feel or if they disagree with my assessment. Mike has their hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think as far as kind of the long game of increasing diversity amongst standards body representatives, I think, attending in person and meeting all the other people, if you're unfamiliar with an organization, can be a huge way to kind of break into that group. And so just having the ability to track costs and plan accordingly might help a travel budget do more towards kind of diversity in attendance.
That is a wonderful point. I like that. I think what I was oh, go ahead, Emily.
No, go ahead.
I think what I was getting hung up on was whether this was capturing two different approvals. One is like that we approve a person representing us in a certain forum or at a certain event. And then the second is the approval of the to pay for that experience, right? Because to Miles's point, like sometimes there are other ways that it might be funded, and so I don't know. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, regardless of whether we end up paying for, let's say there's like that $10,000 event, and we may not be paying for all of that out of like the foundation travel fund, but it's probably good for us to keep track of what these sorts of things cost overall. I don't know.
Miles' point is well taken. Would it perhaps make sense to rephrase this point, line 66 currently, slightly to specify that we're asking about the estimated cost to the foundation of the participation?
Yeah, that's like estimated cost, because maybe an individual is saying, well, I want to use part of my pro dev budget that my company makes available to me, but I want support from the foundation to cover for like part of the flight or something like that.
Yeah, isn't there sorry.
No, please go for it, Robin.
Okay, this is Robin. So, aren't there different policies for different standards bodies on if you represent yourself as an individual or on behalf of an organization or a company? And would kind of munging budgets complicate that? And then to Jory's point earlier, maybe it was Jory's point on where do you put in the guidelines on which standards body you participate in?
So every foundation every standards body has slightly different rules about like who can participate, how they can participate, who they're representing, and depending on even the particular working group or technical committee, it can be very specific. So part of what I'm imagining is the overall charter of this group is being aware of those intricacies and helping almost in like a consultation capacity, ensuring that folks are respecting that. So a really great example would be like TC39 generally has delegates that are coming representing member organizations, and those delegates are expected to be like, for a nonprofit or not-for-profit like ourselves, they don't want to sending tons of folks all the time and undermining their funding model, for example, but they're also extremely interested in having us show up, participate, and help move things forward. So finding a balance there is really important, which means like we can't necessarily send like everyone who raises their hand, but generally it hasn't been a problem to send people who raise their hand as long as we're coordinated. At the W3C, alternatively, something like WebAssembly has the WebAssembly community group, which is much more open and where most of the work actually happens, as opposed to the working group where like it's more or less stamping the standards. So I believe, and Emily could speak to it, that Unicode is completely different. Other TCs at ECMA also operate differently than TC39 does. So I would imagine that on a case-by-case basis, when people make requests, we would likely as a group have to like kind of do the research to ensure that the foundation is in good standing to support the individual and that we are in a capacity to send them. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of there being any kind of like need for reporting about where financial support is coming from. So if someone's going and representing the foundation and their company is paying versus us paying, I don't believe that specific organizations would care about that. But Jory may know more about that.
They tend to not particularly look into the details of like where like the money for an individual's attendance may come from. So I'm thinking here, for example, the W3C has several people who are sponsored, essentially invited experts who receive funds from a variety of sources, you know, to attend working group or even advisory board meetings. So that is not typically something that they split too many hairs about, so long as the organization that the individual is representing when they are in attendance has committed to IP policies.
Okay, thanks for the context. Yeah, just from my experience, representation sometimes matters or often matters. So just the point of clarity and I haven't read through all of the content on the repo on the org yet for the standards working group, but just a little more clarity I think was helpful for me anyhow.
So I went through and I updated that line that it now says the estimated cost to the foundation of their participation. Emily, is that more palpable to you?
Yes, I think there's actually a suggestion from me to do the exact same correction, but yeah, good.
Cool. And then I added one more suggestion: the scope of the work they plan to participate in. Does anyone have a concern with adding that?
No, that's good.
Yeah, that's good. Yep.
Okay, cool. So I am happy with where this is right now. It is not extensive. Emily, I think you have a block on here. Would you be able to sign off on it? Are you happy with that?
Done.
Great. Does anyone object to me landing this policy right now?
Nope.
Cool. Done.
Yay.
Wow, super effective meeting. Thank you. Should we do the same for the scope of the working group right now, or do we have a lot of other stuff on the agenda?
We do not have a lot of other stuff on the agenda, and I would love to do that. I would love to lick that cookie together today.
Jory, would you maybe be able to like spin up a Google Doc and screen share, and maybe we can all collaborate in there?
I can do
Maybe
that.
a little more effective than a GitHub issue.
Or what about a HackMD? I'm in love with HackMD right now.
My corporate affiliation is I don't. Yeah, I'm good.
Groovy. Give me 2 shakes and I'll drop that in the chat.
1 shake.
2 shakes. 2 shakes. 1 shakes. Mini shakes. All right. Wait to see. 2 people are in. Let's see. And this and go here, share my screen.
Could the link be shared in the Slack or on the minutes?
Sure. Hold on. Let me...
I tend to use Zoom on my phone and actually have my laptop in front of me while at these meetings.
That is wise. Okay, Emily, it is now in the Slack. And what was I going to do? I was going to screen share. Which tab? Oh no, oh no. Oh, that's right. Dingus. There we go. Share. Desktop 2. Where's desktop 2? There we go. Okay. Do y'all see my screen and see this document?
Yes.
And you all have
Yes.
access to edit it. Great. Okay. Groove-tastic. Okay. So what we want to do is write our scope. Let's think of a good sentence. Oh. We are all the documents. That's pretty funny. The scope of this group. So this is for kind of that working group document. I'm going to say. I'm just going to write some words. Also, you can all write some words. This is very collaborative. The scope of the standards working group is to represent, hello, OpenJS Foundation project and technical in the boom. I used the word technical twice. I misspelled the word technical. I like Mike's words better than my words. Those are good words. And you know what I think I like about this too, Mike, is that it puts the focus more on the individual project's goals, right? Like not the foundation writ large's position, but like, you know, on really amplifying project needs and goals. And I think that gets back to you know, a kind of more philosophical question that we've had in the past.
And I think it's worth you know, just I think the main I think the main thing about the second set of words is that we have an educational responsibility.
Right, like that, like frankly, and this kind of actually is sitting really well with me with something else that you said about improving diversity in these spaces and encouraging like just people to feel more comfortable and capable, you know, stepping into these standards arenas.
Is it diversity or is it neutrality, perhaps, or both?
Well, I think project contributors are a potential pool of standards of, you know, the next group of standards authors.
Well, they absolutely are, because like the standards, all of the major standards bodies, ESOs, SDOs, all of them are trying to figure out what in the world they should do with regard to open source. And they don't know, because it's a different mindset, it's a different philosophy, it's a different set of concerns. And so, you know, to the extent that the foundation can play a role in you know, supporting the bridge building between these worlds, like the more, that's awesome. That's.
And I think now that Miles has ducked out, we can talk about him. Miles mentioned that, you know, each of these organizations have different ways of doing, you know, effectively the same things. That can be very intimidating when you're on the outside, but none of it is rocket science. And so, you know, a few old hands can kind of grease the skids for getting people past that apparent complexity.
Yeah, because frankly, that's one of the biggest things to overcome is just it does feel like to get involved in a new standards making activity, it's a mountain to climb, just to know whether you can or should or what to do. So there's that educational component. Emily, what do you think might be missing from this? I think you're always really astute about this kind of thing.
I've been listening and it all sounds good. Sorry, I got nothing at this point.
Oh, that's okay. Well, you're always just very thoughtful, and you always have these very good points. I think, I wonder what Miles would say, like, you know, does the scope also need to include, or Joe, does the scope also need to include like the kind of decisions that we're going to be taking in this working group?
Well, I have an update. I went through that PR that I had in draft state and updated it. to be OpenJS specific. And so let me check what it says in that doc, because it does talk about the scope, I believe in here, which I think, I'll drop it into the Zoom chat as well. I dropped it into the Slack, but there you go. I thought it talked about scope, but now I'm not seeing that specifically. So it kind of lays out what the I think what is expected from a README, I guess, of a working group. And so we might pull some information from here. The working group has final authority over this project, including technical governance, project governance and process, contribution policy, GitHub repository hosting, conduct guidelines, maintaining the list of additional collaborators. But I don't know if it gives necessarily guidance on how you would define the scope of the working group. So I'm going to look at other working groups. See what I find.
Okay. Miles, we were just looking at the scope as may have been defined in that document in the pull request. What do you think of what we have so far in the HackMD?
I need to look at it.
So here are some examples. I think is what we're looking to write here, and let me actually give it a more specific link. To have a document, or sorry, to document essentially the scope along the same lines as what's listed here in the TSC's current working groups.
Sorry, say that one more time.
I'm asking if what we're trying to write here in this HackMD doc, is it basically like what we have in each of these current working groups in the working groups MD file in the TSC repo, which I pasted in the Zoom chat. So there's like streams, there's build, there's diagnostics.
Yeah, I would imagine your PR could do a good job of having the overall, like the original document that you had of adding admin policy. Looking at it right now, you have like this kind of like core thing, including the Bootstrap collaborator, membership meetings, DCO, moderation policy. You have all that. That's like, I think you can maybe remove this thing at the bottom that says current working groups could maybe be, I guess maybe I'll add a suggestion there. Yeah, what we should have in the HackMD is just like the block that goes there for current working groups. So it'd be like this section defining the scope of the standards group.
Yeah. Okay. And there are some examples in the TSC MD file, which I think I also dropped. The last link that I dropped into the chat. So there's typically a blurb, on what the expectations are, and then responsibilities include, and a bullet list. So that being said, looking at the document we have here, reading. I mean, I think this is looking good.
My take on the scope is there's kind of two audiences. You know, the like project members should see it and be able to figure out what kind of things might I ask for from the standards group, and standards group members might look at it and say, what would I be remiss if I weren't doing it? And so it's kind of high level but it's kind of basically a high level answer to those two.
I wonder if this first paragraph could be more bullet points, similar to in the TSC document.
Mm-hmm.
You know, raise awareness of developments and relevant standards, help projects formulate a strategy regarding developments that affect them, synthesize and advance those strategies for the relevant bodies, support new contributors from open source and standards making activities.
Yeah, I think we can turn this into a list. It's probably
yeah, a lot of the working groups in the TSC doc are, the paragraph is actually in sometimes just one sentence. You know,
Mm-hmm.
The build working group's purpose is to create and maintain a distributed automation infrastructure, and then there's a bullet list of, you know, aspects that they are responsible for. We could keep it simple and bullet point some stuff out.
And then this last one too can become a bullet point.
Just trying to think of a simple, you know, one-liner to have for the purpose above the bullet points.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I feel like to a certain extent, like to add like the idea of advocacy is it's an important one, but it's also a tiny bit like vague, I suppose.
Yeah, As a developer advocate, you know, I take offense to that, but I'm just kidding. Everything I do is advocacy.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is there, I'm looking at the HackMD and I'm not seeing anything else changing. Are we working in a different doc now?
No, we're in the HackMD, and we've been updating bullets and stuff like that.
I
Maybe-
pasted
Oh,
it.
you know what? I had a cached version that was offline and then I was very confused. Please continue. That makes way more sense now.
Yeah, so I think because it's not, it's advocate is to,
So
yeah.
That's an external role. We're also defining internal tasks that are purposes of the working group.
So I'm trying to shape this similar to the TSC. I'm wondering, so typically they have the paragraph and then responsibilities include. Does that make sense for this as well, in terms of laying out sort of a standard language for working groups within this doc?
Well, one quick question before we dig too much into that. The first sentence, the purpose of the standards working group is to advocate on behalf of the OpenJS projects within standards bodies and organizations. Do we all agree with that premise?
That's
I
my
don't think I
strong answer.
entirely agree.
Because I think
I think that is a part of it, but
I would argue it's not even, I think it's out of scope. So like, and just if you hear me out here, I think that our group is responsible for understanding the standard space and consulting and advocating to help OpenJS projects engage with standards bodies and organizations. So in the explicit distinction there that I think is really important, it's something we discussed in a prior meeting, is that I don't know that this group should be owning the actual engagement, because it could create this process whereby people think that they need to be a member of this group to go participate in standards. Whereas I think that like our capacity should be like much more facilitatory, where we're enabling that. So like, hey, you want to go work on this TC and this standards org? Cool, we will make it work for you. We'll give you a heads up about any of the things that you need to know. Like our job is to know how these organizations work. Our job is to make sure that the foundation is in good standing. Our job is to like approve your ability to go and represent the foundation there. But I don't think that we should necessarily be engaging or owning the actual work itself. I don't know if folks disagree with that, but to me, I feel much more comfortable with that scope, because then our role is support and facilitate as facilitators.
and facilitate.
As opposed to a working group that is focused on getting the work done. That doesn't mean that members of our group can't approach the group. Like it can be recursive there, in which we can approach the group as members of this group to go do work. But I don't think that that should be our core purpose.
So
I'm in agreement.
Miles, could you wrap that up in like a sentence or something?
Sure.
because that really sounded good.
Yeah, it did. And I was trying to write, and then you were just talking way too fast, and I couldn't. So.
Standards working group is to act as a facilitator for OpenJS Foundation projects to support their engagement in various standards, organizations, and working groups. How do people feel about that?
I'm much more comfortable with that, and that goes back to my representation. If two companies disagree on a spec, for example, then being there does not make you an advocate of one specific decision on behalf of your company, or if you're representing OpenJS. So.
So I tried to like enumerate, but not over enumerate. So in various standards organizations, working groups, technical committees, that should not be, thank you, and other spaces where internationally recognized standards are collaborated on. Does that, anyone have concerns about that?
No, sounds right to me.
It sounds right to me, but I also want to, and this is maybe it's too specific and all that, but should we be specific about it being open standards? Because like I don't think that this group would necessarily be from the foundation's perspective. I don't think it would be super prudent to say sponsor a member from a project committee to go work on a standard which has which is like retaining patent protection.
I don't think we want to limit ourselves in that way, because then we have to answer complicated questions about does HTML count, because it's allowing something to happen in browsers that might be non-free or not open.
Free standard. So that working.
I like how Miles phrases it, because there's different definitions of open standards. So
Joy, I think adding to this, if we think about the difference between governance and a charter, similar to like how we do this in other parts of the org, I would like to keep it as broad as possible in the charter, and then perhaps we can scope within governance or something within the repo, the particular foundations that or particular organizations that are within our scope. So like we can really only go and engage in the ones that we're approved to do. That's something we probably should document in the repo right now. That's basically, like ECMA and the W3C, I believe. And then even within ECMA and the W3C, particular working groups and technical committees that we've signed agreements with. We're looking at doing with Unicode. We're looking at doing it with OSI. So it feels to me like this is the kind of thing where like on a case-by-case basis, we can work with the CPC and the board to approve like new entities that we engage with. And it would be kind of in that abstraction level where we could say, no to something that isn't open or is working with patent agreements that we're uncomfortable with.
Okay.
I've got to drop off, but I just wanted to say I like the direction this is headed.
Me as well, on both points.
And I guess I am realizing that it is already 3 o'clock. Looking at the time.
I'm getting kicked out. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Do we want to keep workshopping on this maybe asynchronously in Slack and just kind of get it to a place where we have enough +1s and add it to the PR?
Yep, sounds good to me.
Groovy.
That sounds like an admirable goal.
Yes. All right.
Good work, everybody.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
Good night. Your 3 p.m. is my 10 p.m.
Good night, Emily. Thank you for coming and hanging in there.